Madam President, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Let's start with Moldova. How did the trip go? How was it meeting President Vučić?
The European political community is quite a new, but I would say important initiative that brings together all European nations, and it also gives us an opportunity to have an equal voice, even for those of us that are not members of the European Union yet. Therefore, it is quite important for us to have not just a seat at that table, but also the opportunity to see how we can contribute in meeting global challenges that are specific to our continent, obviously, and at the same time to discuss what we're dealing with in our region. Apart from the discussions within the summit, I had bilaterals with a number of leaders. I had the opportunity to, of course, directly inform the vast majority of European leaders on what's going on in Kosovo, given the recent tensions in the north. And of course, a long meeting with Chancellor Scholz and President Macron, which then ended up with their request to have both myself and President Vučić in the same room to discuss, to exchange views on the way out. The meeting with Vučić, it was, I would say, expected in the sense that Vučić, in most of his meetings, is quite a drama king. So he, of course, tried to create quite a lot of drama again, but provided no ideas that would contribute to peace and stability in the region. In turn, of course, I did present what I had also presented previously to President Macron and Chancellor Scholz as possible ideas that would contribute to our joint efforts to de-escalation and at the same time would be more than just short-term solutions, because we've been having a lot of short-term solutions in the past decade, and what we're facing is just crisis after crisis. So we need to deal with the root cause of a problem. Now, it is essential that the dialogue continues in Brussels under the auspices of the EU and supported by the US. So I did have a chance there to also encourage High Representative Borrell to invite the parties as soon as possible and make this dialogue more intensive, because the more meetings take place in Brussels, the more progress, no matter how slow, but the more progress can be achieved.
When you say Vučić is a drama king, what do you mean by that? What happened exactly?
So he loves to pretend that he's making great concessions, that there's too much pressure on him, that he's suffering, that he's in danger and all that. But look, I mean, those kind of tantrums, they should be left outside of the room after the age of 4. Leaders need to show true leadership, especially when faced with these kind of difficult situations. And if he truly believes in peace and stability, he shouldn't throw tantrums, he should throw solutions to the table. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that so far from him. I think that the situation, of course, is much dangerous than this, because what President Vučić is doing, he is supporting not just politically but also financially, as well as through weapons, these criminal gangs and criminal groups who also participated in the violence against NATO. So we have a situation where Serbia caused violence against NATO. This is a test now not just for Kosovo institutions when it comes to rule of law and making sure that there's no impunity for these criminals who attacked NATO, but it's a test for the entire NATO to make sure that those who attacked do not get away with it, because otherwise it would simply encourage them to organize more attacks. As we see nowadays on social media, especially what I've been informed by my team is that there are a lot of extremist groups who are calling for more attacks on NATO soldiers. And this is an extremely dangerous situation. So President Vučić needs to stop his support of these criminal gangs. They are not going to help in any way bring more peace and stability to the region.
I want to get you spoke about how you spoke with the French president and the German chancellor. What's your reaction to them putting pressure on for Kosovo to hold more elections in the north?
I would say we had a very constructive discussion with both President Macron and Chancellor Scholz. In fact, I do appreciate their commitment to making sure that the region moves forward towards Euro-Atlantic integration. And I also appreciate their personal commitment to making sure that the German-French proposal, which turned to be an EU proposal later on, moves on. And of course, we are all, in Kosovo at least, interested to make sure that this plan, which was initially agreed in Brussels and later on the annex was added to it in Ohrid, is fully implemented. So we will work, of course, with both Germany and France, and mostly with the United States of America, which remains our most steadfast partner, to make sure that the steps ahead are such that not only contribute to short-term peace and stability, but also open our path towards European and Euro-Atlantic integration. Now, I do understand that everyone is extremely concerned with the dire situation in the north, and as I said, there are reasons to be concerned because we're talking about extremely dangerous groups that are trained in Serbia. They bring in weapons through illegal routes from Serbia into Kosovo. And we've seen the capacity that they have to cause violence, to cause injury. So we need to make sure that we're very effective on fighting these gangs, fighting these criminal groups, and at the same time find joint solutions which would ensure the return of Kosovo Serbs to Kosovo institutions through a democratic participation process. So, of course, there are times when there are differences as to tactics that should be used, but all of these countries, from the United States to Germany to France to Italy to, of course, the United Kingdom and every other country that has been standing with us every step of the way, I believe has the exact same aims that we have, and that is seeing Kosovo's international standing stronger and also seeing Kosovo move on towards Euro-Atlantic integration. Now, we need to find a way together.
So will there be new elections? When will there be new elections?
So in terms of when, that really depends on which of the two articles in our law that provides for possibilities for new elections will be the ones to be triggered. There are two ways through which they can be caused. One is resignation, but that entirely depends on the political will, I would say, of the candidates that have been elected. And we're not only talking about mayors, but also members of the municipal assembly. So that is their choice. And of course, as president, I do not interfere with that. But there is a second way, which I think would be more democratic and would ensure in a more certain way the participation of Serbs in elections. And that is to have 20% of the voters' lists sign a petition through which they can cause new elections. I think, one, we would ensure the participation of Serbs because the request would have come from them to begin with, from citizens. It doesn't have to come from political parties. And secondly, it's very much a legal process. It's not political, so it doesn't really depend on the political will. It obliges the institutions to go through this. It's some sort of a referendum, in fact. So I think if we go through the first option. It's really hard to predict what would be the position of these current mayors as well as members of the municipal assembly in terms of timing. The second, it takes a few months. So if the request comes from the citizens, and in fact it would be 9,000 signatures, which they can collect if they want in a mere day. So that can very quickly be organized. And that's when it comes to the mayors, of course. What is crucial here is to ensure that before we move on with these processes, there is, of course, a reassurance that the international community will make sure that Belgrade will not interfere. I'm talking about foreign illegal interference into our elections through the violence, intimidation, and blackmailing that they were doing against Serb candidates. And of course, last time when they forced candidates to withdraw from running for elections, then the Serbs who lived there had none of their candidates on the list, so obviously they did not participate. So the result was not a voluntary boycott. It was non-voluntary. It was a result of illegal foreign interference by another country, by Serbia, in this case, into our elections. But if the Serbs who live there, if the citizens want mayors of their choosing, there's a way how to do that. And that is by asking for these new elections, which of course we would then organize based on Kosovo's legal and constitutional proceedings. And I strongly believe this is the way out. But we need to ensure participation. We will make sure that all conditions are there when it comes to safety and security. But the international community will hopefully help us out in making sure that Serbia does not interfere and just lets the citizens use their constitutionally protected rights to vote and be voted.
So as soon as these 9,000 signatures are delivered, there will be elections in the months following, regardless of whether these, whether Serbia agrees to not interfere. Regardless of what Serbia says, there will be elections triggered if these 9,000 signatures.
So legally speaking, these 9,000 signatures, of course, upon being confirmed, would trigger two processes. The one is a referendum to remove the current mayors, and the second is a vote on electing new mayors. So there are two voting processes. But as I said, this, I believe, would ensure their participation because the request in the first place would have come from them. I do not want to judge what would be the result either on the first referendum or the second part, which is elections. But I think it would ensure that participation, at least it would give an idea that there might be participation. I think this should go in parallel with every single effort from our friends and allies to make sure that Serbia does not interfere illegally as they did so far, because if they do, obviously this would largely hurt our joint efforts to have participation, but also to have a higher democratic legitimacy of new institutions that are chosen.
Do you share Prime Minister Kurti's assertion that the West is trying to appease Serbia and is being disproportionately harsh towards Kosovo regarding the tensions in the north?
So I think, having worked in Kosovo institutions for quite some time, there are times where we have disagreements with the international community on tactics. But look, even among the best of friends, even among family, you sometimes do have disagreements. What we don't have disagreements on, according to my assessment with the international community, is where the region should move towards, and that is Euro-Atlantic integration. What we don't have disagreements with on our allies is where Kosovo belongs, and that is in the European Union, in NATO, and in every other international organization that is of our interest.
But what about with Prime Minister Kurti? What about not with the community?
Yeah. So this is an answer to that, in fact. I don't think we have disagreements with the international community on our joint efforts to strengthen Kosovo's sovereignty, territorial integrity, as well as our independence. In fact, the reason why Kosovo has been successful, apart from the resilience of its people, has been because we've had allies by our side. So there are, I think, joint efforts to make this happen, and although sometimes we might disagree or we might see things differently on how Serbia is being seen, how Serbia is being treated, I think we need to focus on the positive. We really need to focus on what keeps us together. We are like-minded countries with the West, with the Western democracies. We have worked together every step of the way in the good days and the bad days, and we need to move on together in that same direction. Now, of course, we continue to publicly speak about what Serbia has been doing. There's a long list of Serbia's connections and ties with Russia and China, both political, economic, as well as military, which we believe is hurting the region. And in fact, our partners share this same concern. Now, we have different ways on how we express that. In Kosovo, of course, we are more expressive towards Serbia's malign influence, which is serving Russia's interest in the region. Some of our partners choose a different method on how to make sure that they fight this malign influence. But I think we all have the same motives, which is make sure that no Russian malign influence is successful in the region, that Serbia is not allowed to hurt our territorial integrity and sovereignty, and in turn to strengthen Kosovo internationally. So What I think is some of the things that we have proposing, for example, to the European Union as Kosovo institutions is to not give Serbia large projects, large amounts of money, unless they also show EU values. Because so far they have not aligned with the EU on sanctions against Russia, on sanctions against Iran, and more than 50% of other foreign and security policy decisions. So if they don't align with the EU, they shouldn't deserve EU money either. We have also proposed to the EU for them to freeze further steps in Serbia's EU path. Obviously, it's quite hard to get a unanimous position within the EU on these kind of issues. However, of course, as Kosovo, we continuously speak about what we believe would be the best solution for the region. Because if they are encouraged to not align with the EU on one side, align with Russia on the other side, but then they get a lot of EU money, then what's the point? So we do, of course, we are quite expressive on these issues because we don't believe it helps it helps the region. We don't believe it encourages the democratic countries, but on the other side, I believe that when it comes to the final goal, we have the same final goal that the EU and other partners have, which is to have a region that moves towards Euro-Atlantic integration.
So I understand that you share the same goals, and I hear what you're saying. I just want to come back to that one question about Prime Minister Kurti. Is there anything that you disagree with about how he has handled this situation?
Now, both Prime Minister Kurti and I and other leaders of the institutions, in fact, believe that Kosovo has been very cooperative on so many fronts, and I want to give you a couple of examples so that were well understood. Elections were not caused by us. Elections happened in Kosovo, early elections happened because Vučić forced the 4 Serb mayors to resign. When he forced them to resign, our constitution and our legal obligations call us to announce new elections. Because of the calls from our allies, as well as the security situation, I postponed elections for 4 months. After postponing elections for 4 months, we made sure that there is also another postponement for Serb candidates to be able to register. We also showed flexibility by organizing elections in alternative sites, so that no one in the north would feel some sort of interference with their daily life and no tensions would be caused. And all of this was done in full coordination. We've had quint statements saying that elections shall be held in April of this year in line with Kosovo's constitutional and legal framework. Everything went fine, everything was peaceful, and after the elections we again had the quint saying that they accept that the entire process was without tensions as well as in line with legal and constitutional requirements. And then the oath was also done from alternative sites. So the reason why I'm mentioning this is that everything was done in full coordination with our partners. What happened that morning on Friday was that the mayors wanted to go to their jobs. And because they were stopped by these criminal groups, only then the police intervened. So practically, just like in any other democratic country, if citizens are endangered by a bunch of criminal mobs, obviously the police would go to their rescue. So that's what happened. They were trying to go to a building that belongs to the Republic of Kosovo. When Ahtisaari concluded the negotiations on Kosovo status, among others, he had a page on Kosovo property which said every property within the borders of the Republic of Kosovo belongs to the Republic of Kosovo. So the question here is very simple. Is the north of Kosovo Republic of Kosovo? The answer is yes, and it will remain so. So of course, neither Kurti nor myself nor anyone in the Republic of Kosovo has the constitutional authority to tell a police officer, don't protect a civilian citizen who has full authority by law to enter a Republic of Kosovo building. So we're talking about the sovereignty of the country over its own property. So of course, we have that same belief over the constitutional obligations that both the Prime Minister and I and every other institution like the Parliament have over protecting the sovereignty.
But I sense there is a disagreement somewhere.
I think, well, I mean, it would have been impossible, as I said, even among the best of friends, even among family, sometimes not to have different approaches on issues.
So how would you have approached it?
We work, well, now I don't want to talk about the past, to be honest. I want to talk about how to approach finding a solution forward. And I do want to emphasize that the solution towards the sustainability of our action also depends on making sure that our alliances with the United States and the European Union are strong. I believe that working together with our allies is a strength. It's not a weakness.
Do you not feel let down?
Focusing on the past, of course, as I said, every action of Kosovo police was fully legitimate. The police followed the constitution, followed the law, and I support them.
Should they be pulled out now? Should they still be there?
The Kosovo police has the right to be everywhere in any part of Kosovo territory where they deem appropriate based on their security assessment. So the security assessment is the job of the professionals among Kosovo institutions. If their security assessment is to be in a certain building, as long as it's Kosovo territory, they will be there. So it needs to be based on security assessment of the professionals. We just need to make sure that, of course, that we look at every single action that we make as part of the bigger picture as well, which is we are under constant threat by Serbia and Russia. Russia truly wants this region not to be in peace because through this they would attack the values-based systems that the European Union and NATO are. So we need to work strongly with our allies to make sure that in this big battle, we're not alone, and to make sure that in this big battle, we are triumphant.
Are there any concrete measures you can commit to pushing for to de-escalate tensions from the Kosovan side?
We already have. First of all, we're discussing about new elections, early elections, which I think it's a major step towards de-escalation, and it provides for a long-term solution because it gives the Serbs who live in the north an instrument to elect mayors of their own choosing, and then they can be represented through a democratic vote, a democratic process. So apart from that, of course, we're offering to work together with our international partners to make sure that we fight these criminal gangs, these criminal groups. And I don't want to mix ordinary citizens with these groups. We're talking about groups that are in the blacklist of the United States and the UK. So the ordinary citizens are not to blame for what happened there. However, we need to make sure that these people face justice, and that would be a big contribution towards peace and stability. And finally, we need to work to make sure that the citizens who live in the north are heard, that they feel more they feel more safe and secure, and they feel that they are more included in processes that relate to their life in Kosovo. And finally, of course, Kosovo has provided for its full commitment to fully implement the agreements reached in Brussels and Ohrid. We need to make sure that full implementation is what everyone is pushing forward, because if we use cherry picking and if there's only one article that there is focus on, obviously that's not going to help the credibility of the EU-led process.
Serbia is hosting the Platinum Wolf multinational military exercise with, I believe, including the US. Should the US and other countries pull out, do you think, in response to Serbian actions?
I believe that Serbia has constantly shown that they see Russia and China, sometimes even Iran, as their partners, not just in military, but also in political activities. They've signed a deal with Lavrov to align their foreign policy with Russia. They have multiplied the number of military exercises that they have with Russia in the past couple of years. So it's not like the more support they are offered from the West, they cut their ties with Russia. Numbers speak differently, facts speak differently. Serbia hasn't shown any willingness to align with the US or the EU on values or on sanctions. Therefore, Of course, this is a decision of the United States, but we do not see that this is taking Serbia, of course, in the direction of aligning with the West. But as I said, these are, of course, decisions that they will take into consideration based on the information that they have.
Do you think the West is treading softly with Serbia because Belgrade is reportedly supplying arms to Ukraine?
There is clearly I would say, position that has been stated publicly by the West, according to which they hope that Serbia would break from their coalition with Russia. I don't think that the fact that they are kind of selling something to other sellers, which then they would sell to Ukraine, is enough of a testament to Serbia's loyalty towards Western values. That's my impression, but I do understand the reason why our partners continue to work into making sure that they bring Serbia closer to the West. That would actually be in the interest of everyone in this region. If Serbia would move towards the European Union, that would be great news for the entire Western Balkans. So for that reason, of course, we don't think that Serbia has done enough. Serbia needs to prove that by adopting sanctions against Russia. Otherwise, just voting in favor of some resolutions and just selling a few, in fact, according to the information that we have, is very little amount. It's nothing of big significance, but a very little amount of these weapons to intermediaries is not a testament enough to show that they are actually breaking their ties with Russia if you simply compare that action with how much they have been doing with Russia and China, by the way.
When is the Association of Serb Municipalities going to be set up?
So that also depends on the process of the dialogue in Brussels. I do hope that there will be meetings very soon and that the dialogue will become even more intensive. So there was a very short draft, some sort of a vision that was presented by the Prime Minister in the previous meeting, and that of course will turn into a more detailed draft in the next meeting whenever Mr. Borrell calls for that. And then Kosovo's draft would, of course, be reviewed by the European Union. What is extremely important for us and what we've been extremely honest with our partners is that that needs to be done in line with Kosovo's Constitutional Court decision of 2015, as well as our constitution. But at the same time, the written position of the United States expressed in the op-ed by Mr. Cholet and Mr. Escobar, these are the principles or the parameters that we follow in our work when it comes to this draft. So I believe that we can move on as fast as the EU wants us to move on. They need to call for these meetings where these drafts would be discussed. I'm not that very confident that Serbia would ever agree, to be honest, to drafts that are in line with Kosovo's constitution. So they will try to drag and delay and block the process, but that shouldn't block our work with the international partners. And we are ready, as I said, to implementing our commitments. We're not running away from them.
How long will KFOR troops be on the ground?
I would say at least until Kosovo joins NATO, which is every single day is proving to be more and more necessary. Of course, KFOR troops have proven to be indispensable, including in the past couple of days. I want to show the appreciation of the people of Kosovo for their role, for their support of peace and security, and at the same time, of course, condemn violence that has been carried out against them, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that there's no impunity for the attackers. When I say we, of course, I mean it is the job of the law enforcement institutions, because as politicians we do not, of course, interfere in the work of these independent institutions.
And just finally, Kosovo declared independence in 2008. So in that time, I mean, there's still violence in the north. There are still, as you say, waiting for meetings and then agreements, and then they don't work, and then that fails, and then we go back and we try again. And how far has Kosovo actually come since declaring independence? What has it done for the people, for the economy?
It is unfortunate how much energy is spent on the issue of the dialogue. Kosovo is a successful country, no matter its relationship with Serbia. Kosovo's moving on, and it has become a shining example in the region when it comes to democracy, rule of law, economic development, the level of human rights protection. And there's no other constitution in the European continent that provides its minority communities the kind of protections that we do provide in our constitution. So it's a shining example. It's something to be proud of. But of course, with these daily problems, with the institutional and security aggression that we face from Serbia, what you hear about mostly and what you see in the headlines of international media is not the successes of our youth or the successes of our institutions, but you hear about these tensions that Serbia is causing in the north through these criminal groups. But no matter these threats and no matter these challenges, Kosovo is going to move on. Kosovo is here to stay as a successful, as a thriving democracy, as a sovereign and independent country, and is here to stay forever. And I believe that with the absolutely brilliant potential that our youth offers and has, we will continue to succeed, not just locally, but also in the international stage. From science to technology, from music to art, our youth is the face of our country.
It's a very young country.
It is, not just young, but I would say also brilliant in every possible area. They need a chance. We will continue to make sure that we provide these chances, while at the same time, of course, dealing with the challenges that Serbia is trying to pose on our way. But failure is not an option. Kosovo is here to stay.
Okay, this is the real final question. I just want to get a sense of how worried are you about what is happening in the north? Do you think that this could spill over? Do you think this was a one-time thing, violence happened in a few towns and that now it's done? Or do you think there is a real possibility that this could spiral?
I'm absolutely concerned because, of course, we've been warning about this for at least a year, that these criminal groups are being trained in Serbia by other criminal groups, and that a lot of weapons are coming in from Serbia into Kosovo. And we know from the past, but also from their work in other countries in the region, how dangerous these groups are. They have shown, I would say, a part of that day when they attacked KFOR. But that doesn't mean that they will stop unless they face justice, unless these groups are arrested, which is why I think our focus must be on rule of law and no impunity for these criminal gangs. Once we make sure that we're successful jointly with our partners on this, because it takes a lot of work together, then we're going to see that finally Serbs in the north will feel free to express their will through democratic means, to choose whomever they want to be their democratic representatives, but also finally focus on their daily most acute problems, from lack of jobs to problems with economy, inflation, domestic violence, and all the kind of problems that everyone else in Kosovo, in the region, and in Europe faces. But because of constant intimidation by these groups, they haven't been free to deal with other problems that our citizens face. So I think, yes, of course we are concerned, but I think steps ahead are clear. We need rule of law as a precondition for democracy and as a precondition to peace and stability in Kosovo and beyond.
That's all I had to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A pleasure to talk to you. Yeah.